Hi, this is Michael Nikula. Welcome to the Dash Show. Today we have a very controversial topic, which is legalizing marijuana. Well, it's controversial only for two people, Stephen Harper and the Pope. For everybody else, especially Canadians, it seems to be a slam dunk. It was really hard to find somebody who opposed legalizing marijuana to have on the show. Many polls show that most Canadians actually favor legalizing marijuana. So we're asking, if we live in a democratic society, how come it's not legal yet? We have some parts of it are legal, but not the real thing. So today we're going to talk about this. Enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Dash Show. Marijuana. It's just awesome. And it's also the topic of today's show. Our panel of guests today, I'm happy to announce, is Terry Parker. He's the Parkdale High Park candidate for the Marijuana Party of Canada, as well as our other expert, Boris, the Executive Director of Normal Canada, the National Organization for Reform in Marijuana Laws. We also have the Dash Show's second funniest comic ever, Nick Savage, on our panel today, and the always lovely Andrea Butler. Take it away, guys.
All right, I think probably the first question and the big question why we're here is why is it illegal, especially when we know that there's no harm done to the person who's ingesting or smoking it. It could help so many people in terms of, their health, disease. What is the problem here? Why is?
Well, Andrea, I don't entirely agree with you that it's not in any way harmful to a person or a person's body. Marijuana can be habit forming. It's enjoyable and you can do it repeatedly. It's not that expensive and it's easy to find.
It's habit forming if that habit is Doritos.
Well, also I think there's a difference between habit forming and a physiological addiction.
Well, certainly, but at the same time, if you enjoy and ingest marijuana on a regular basis, it can affect your life, and you can procrastinate and fall behind things that you normally would do, which would then allow feelings of depression and anxiety to enter your system, which then you would probably perhaps try to cure with a little bit of grass. So I agree, it's not addictive, but at the same time, it can't be ignored that anything that's incredibly enjoyable and can lead to ignoring one's own responsibilities in lives can have some very serious effects.
Well, I really think, though, that if somebody is going to be unmotivated when they smoke weed, they are still going to be completely unmotivated when they don't. So I don't see that there's going to be a correlation there.
That's perhaps true. But most of the reasons for, if I may, most of the reasons that marijuana is illegal in Canada actually have nothing to do with that habit-forming / addictive question. Mostly it has to do with sort of three big areas. First of all, the U.S. government won't allow it. Under the Paul Martin government, there was a lot of talk about, in the early 2000s, there was a lot of talk about possibly legalizing marijuana. However, the ambassador of the U.S. at the time put quite a bit of pressure on the Canadian government, and nothing ever came of it, and a Harper government came in, oddly enough.
That wasn't Ambassador Tommy Chong, I'm guessing.
No, it wasn't. There's also, of course, the medical establishment who don't feel that their monopoly on treating diseases and whatnot should be taken away from them by drugs that poor people can grow, essentially. So they have a stake in keeping doctors prescribing and pharmacologists making pills. And finally, of course, the legal system makes money through lawyers, prosecutors, jails, various other forms of, legal capital, if you will, that benefit from the illegality of marijuana. And I think until these three things are sort of rectified and discussed openly, I don't think that marijuana will ever be legal.
If I could chime in here, a couple of things. I mean, of those 3 points you mentioned, one of them is actually correct. And that is the last one, that the legal establishment, lawyers, prisons, police officers, they rely on budgets So there's a lot of money going to these organizations, and they have an interest in keeping it illegal. However, when it comes to the other 2 points, the medical establishment wants to cure people. If there's proof that marijuana is effective, the medical establishment will get behind it. I don't really subscribe to the conspiracy theory. I think if there's something beneficial, then doctors can get that proof. The problem is doctors require an enormous volume of proof, and I don't think there's sufficient research in marijuana to convince them. And the reason there's no research is because it's illegal. And when it comes to the U.S., the United States are the biggest creators of demand for drugs on the planet. They are not in a position to be giving anyone lessons on how to deal with illegal drugs. And if you look at what's going on in the States, it's practically more legal in California right now than it is in Amsterdam. So this argument that the United States won't let us do it, we are a sovereign country, and they have no business interfering with our national policies, and we have no business interfering with theirs. So you do have to look at the money going into the legal system. That's probably the only point that I would agree with. But as far as the other conspiracy and the United States somehow preventing us, that's just not true.
I'm willing to bet with all that money that goes into the American legal system to fight marijuana users and salesmen, I could buy a ton of weed.
Well, it's a relatively easy plant to grow. The reason it's worth so much on the black market right now is because it's illegal. Once it's legalized, the price is definitely going to bottom out. I mean, it's no more complicated to grow marijuana than it is to grow tomatoes. If tomatoes are outlawed, you could be pretty sure they would cost an exorbitant amount of money. So on an economic point, under legalization, the good thing is people who use marijuana would probably have more disposable income and would be able to spend on other things. And as far as the other thing that was mentioned earlier, the risks of usage and people, either getting addicted or having other complications, it's not good for everyone. There are some risks involved with marijuana. But when you criminalize that activity, you actually compound and increase those negative effects, because you can't reach out to these people properly when they're being treated as criminals. I mean, alcohol, tobacco, even playing hockey has risks and negative effects. If you were to outlaw these practices, you would find those negative effects would get worse, because there's no one who's responsible to oversee or to reduce those risks. When it comes to tobacco, there's a big label on the package that says, hey, this stuff is bad for you. The people who are dealing pot do not put labels on a package. They do not care about photo ID. The only photo they want to see is the picture of a queen on your $20 bill. You're good to go. So that's why it's easier for kids to get illegal drugs than it is to get alcohol or tobacco. And that's proves that prohibition is not controlling drugs. Prohibition is the complete lack and absence of control. It's the law of the jungle. And when that happens, it makes stuff worse. We need to be responsible. We need to monitor what the content is. There's more regulations as to what goes in a box of cornflakes than what goes in a bag of pot. And for people who use marijuana, that's not fair.
I'd like to make a comment when it comes to the conspiracy or medical fish, and I have to disagree with my colleague, Mr. Mark Boris St. Marie. As an advocate of marijuana, I've also been involved in a great deal of research in the past to confirm marijuana for treating epilepsy. And it's been most disheartening and disappointing that when involved in studies of the Addiction Research Foundation in 1979, that instead of investigating the anticonvulsant property of marijuana being CBD, we rather investigate the THC properties known to have paradoxical effects with epilepsy. And when it comes to my interests for treating epilepsy, been totally ignored when neglecting CBD. There's been all kinds of research. Marijuana is great for cancer, epilepsy, MS, CP, and the list goes on. Yet when it comes to having faith in a medical profession, there's a lack of that. And as such, people are dying from cancer, from epilepsy. We look at 2,400 to 4,600 deaths every year across Canada due to status epilepticus. These deaths could be avoided if we had a medical profession that was not so discriminatory upon marijuana and looked at it and addressed it and did honest research marijuana, which would confirm is great for any condition on this planet.
I did a bunch of research on marijuana too about 20 minutes before the show with Pink Floyd and some other friends, and it was hilarious.
The interesting thing to notice as well is that, marijuana is illegal, and year after year, statistics show more people using it. More people admit to using it. Tobacco is legalized, and year after year, less people are smoking it. So if the objective, and I believe that less drug use in society is a good thing, whether it's prescription drugs illegal drugs, alcohol. I mean, if less people are using this in society, it's good for public health. And if the idea is to reduce usage, well, we look at the fact that it's illegal and more people are doing it, we are doing something wrong. It certainly is not a factor in making a decision. When a young person decides to use marijuana or any other drug, whether it's legal or not, has got to be the last thing on their list. Usually it's like, oh, I'm bored, my friends are doing it, or looks like fun. Legal, not legal, they could care less. So I think we'd have a more coherent message if we could have labeling and studies and tell people that there are some risks involved with marijuana, but you have to do that in a legal context. And the reason it hasn't changed is it's politicians don't like to admit guilt. If they back up on this, then they're going to admit that it was a wrong policy, and they're not crazy about that. There have been some tries. The Liberals are a lot more open-minded, but the current Conservative government, they're legislating morality. And that's what's difficult about drugs and other similar issues. When you get into moral debate, marijuana is a bad drug. Well, that's a moral judgment. Whether it's euthanasia, abortion, gay rights, these are all issues that people have very strong feelings and are based in their morality and their moral values. And we see someone like Stephen Harper and the Conservatives, they're not a fan. They are morally opposed to drugs. I guess maybe they feel that if bad things happen to an illegal drug user, well, they had it coming. They just had to not use the stuff. And that is like the most irresponsible, sticking your head in the sand sort of attitude. That's not how you make society better.
If the people in this country want to see marijuana legalized, forget the Liberals, forget the NDP, forget the Conservatives, vote the Marijuana Party of Canada. That is the only way that will have marijuana successful in this country for treating MS, epilepsy, cancer, and all the rest of it. That's the only way. Vote marijuana.
So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for the Dash Show's marijuana special. I'd like to thank our panel guests, as always, Nick Savage, Andrea Butler. Thank you very much. As well as our experts, Terry Parker, who you can learn more about and read up on at themarijuanaparty.ca. And finally, I'd like to thank our Skype guest, Boris, who you can visit at his website below. And you can always come and visit us at thedashshow.com. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I might not be the most ideal person to stand up here and pontificate about marijuana. Truth be told, I haven't smoked a joint since I was at high school this morning to pick up a dime bag. That being said, I'm only 30 years old now, but I learned a while ago that pot doesn't necessarily agree with me. Back when I was in college, I had some anxiety problems, and smoking pot just made it a little bit worse. So now I've cast it aside a little bit, and it only comes to visit once in a while, like a distant foreign cousin. Really awesome, hot foreign cousin who makes everything funnier and tastes better. Who can even make corner gas funny somehow. It's amazing. But yeah, it's not really my thing so much anymore. Every time I smoke it with friends, even just a little bit, nowadays the anxiety just kind of takes me over, and someone could say something completely simple to me, ask me a question like, hey, do you want to get pizza? And my stupid balloon mush Neanderthal brain just condenses it and turns it into gibberish that I don't understand, and all I hear are birds chirping, and I sit there with a stupid smile on my face, nodding and drooling like a dumb kid at Christmas, a really high dumb kid at Christmas. But just because marijuana doesn't agree with me doesn't mean that others shouldn't have the right to enjoy it if they want to. Because let's face it, having marijuana be illegal is completely illogical. It makes about as much sense as a one-armed hooker and a policeman with an alligator head having a hammer fight in a canoe. And I know what you're saying. That's ridiculous because cops don't like canoes. I know, but I digress. Marijuana is still completely harmless. Marijuana hasn't hurt anyone since the mid-19th century when the Irish discovered it and snacked themselves into a potato famine. Or where the notorious Marijuana Johnson shot up that church in Windsor, Ontario. But he was really, really drunk. No, marijuana is perfectly harmless. To be honest with you, marijuana is as harmless as French fries, as far as I'm concerned. It's as harmless as mouthwash. It's as harmless as weed or pot or reefer. Now, you're more likely to overdose on unicorn blood. But One thing that they do say is that marijuana can cause memory loss. Here's to hoping that there's enough to make me forget the Harper administration. Have a great day.
Welcome back. Well, that was a fun discussion. I, for one, vote to legalize marijuana, but you don't have to agree with me. You can go on the website and vote. It's www.onlineparty.ca and search for the legalizing marijuana issue. Thank you for watching the show.